right. So, are fans that heartbroken about Calais Campbell?
Are fans not? I think they should be. That's a huge loss. That's a crushing blow to the Dolphins in 2025 from the standpoint of the defensive line, what he proved he can still do last season. And then the bigger thing is the leadership for a team that is largely, I don't want to say void of it, because there are still some guys who bring that presence to the locker room. But there's also some big personalities that strongly counter it and bring the leadership level down, like a Tyreek Hill. But having Calais Campbell in that locker room, that was a huge gain for what it could have been last season. It could have really been, I mean, the season was a disaster for all intents and purposes, but it could have really gone awry, like way downhill, if you didn't have a presence like Calais Campbell in there, where he was really one of the only guys that was truly being an adult professional in the locker room. So from a leadership standpoint, an immense loss. And boy, I was surprised it was the Cardinals, not the Baltimore Ravens. You know, we had already had it as a foregone conclusion he was gone. I was thinking Ravens if he were to go, but the Cardinals swoop right in and he goes back to where it started for him in the NFL career.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, because it was the Ravens, or if somebody offered him a bunch of money, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But my point, and I said it last week, I said, and the week before, he's going to the Ravens, or if somebody offers a 40-year-old a lot of money, and that's exactly what the Cardinals did, and that's where he went. But he was never coming back here unless nobody was interested. And that's really, to me, that's the bigger point here. We're misleading Dolphin Nation, okay? Because Calais Campbell wanted out. He's just really decent about it. He's not going to do it the Jimmy Butler way. He's going to do it like a decent human being. He's going to be professional about it. And it's just going to look like he doesn't want to be a part of it in a way, but it'll be in a professional manner, like he wanted to go exercise his free agent right. And that's because they know that in that building, they knew he wasn't coming back. I don't know who you talked to, but they knew he wasn't coming back. So why is it a surprise? I'm not exactly sure. That's the part I don't understand, because there's no surprise here on this show, yet we are feeding the public like they should be surprised. And that's
I'm saying surprise from the standpoint that it was the Cardinals. I always had it being the Ravens. That's my only surprise. But yeah, you're right, with the caveat of if another team offered him a bunch of money, because let's just say, it should be, this is his last dance, right? So it's a great story. Number one, he goes back to where it started, and that he made a Super Bowl in his first professional season after coming out as a standout at the University of Miami, gets drafted in 2008 to the Cardinals. They go to the Super Bowl, make a surprise run that year when no one had them doing much. And that was a really cool team with Larry Fitzgerald and Anquan Bolden, Kurt Warner throwing them the ball. And Calais Campbell, as a rookie on the defensive side, got over there and played a great game against those Steelers, but ultimately lost with Antonio Holmes making that catch in the end zone. But just a cool story that he goes back to where it started for him, where he had a lengthy early part of his career. And you're right, if it's his last dance, then that's his final opportunity to make that NFL money. But from the standpoint of the Dolphins, first, it was telling when at the end of the season he was looking for that release if the Dolphins were eliminated. So he was still looking for a way out at that point, but doing it in a professional manner where he's not going to do it until the team is eliminated. Now, it was the worst case scenario there where they remained alive until week 18, and then so he's got to stay at that point. But then once he plays in week 18, he can't just go to a playoff team once he finishes the regular season, unfortunately for him. So it was just the worst case scenario where the Dolphins stayed alive, but they didn't control their own destiny, and they needed the Broncos to lose, and the Chiefs were resting all their players and not even putting up a fight. And that game was over really quickly as the Dolphins started to just go downhill against the Jets as their playoff fate was being sealed, or lack of playoff fate was being sealed. So, but I do give Calais. So on this standpoint, when the trade deadline was going on and the Ravens were making a move, trying to land him and make an offer, then it was Calais saying that okay, he's convinced that the Dolphins could make a turnaround mid-season and still go for it. He wanted to play out the season the way it went, but it was telling that then at the end, yes, he did want a way out in the in the scenario where the Dolphins were eliminated.
It's just I'm listening. I'm happy for him. He was a pros pro here. He was great for them. It's just sad that they couldn't maximize it. And I think if you win 11 or 12 games last year, and if you get to the playoffs and maybe even win a game, I think this whole thing changes and people want to be a part of it. I all throughout the offseason, what I've seen is a disconnect. Is what it seems like. Like Javon Holland, even though they weren't going to sign him to a long-term contract, he was more than happy to move on and turn the page from this place. Whether Reggie McKenzie, you can say he wanted to, go back to his hometown and all of that. But yeah, he could go back to that job next year and the year after to be a consultant in his hometown. They'll hire him at that time. If he thought they were going to win here, and they were going to have he would have stuck around. You know what I'm saying? It's just, you can tell from talking to some of the people, from some of the changes that are going on, you can kind of tell that there is I hate to say it, but it's kind of like a dark cloud that's kind of moving in over the organization for this season. And then on top of that, a lot of the fan base, there's not a lot of expectations. Media, I don't know where you stand, but I don't expect much from this team. I think this team's going to struggle to be right around the 500, like always. You know what I mean? I don't have a lot of expectations. So I'm not sure if you sense it or feel it or see it, but that's kind of the way I see it right now. It's just kind of like a really dark cloud that's moving over the organization in the 25 season.
Yeah, Big O, it kind of feels like that window where you thought this core could compete has come and gone, and you saw the end of it, and then now it's really going to be with 10 draft picks, a youth movement, and without a sexy free agent signing, with that, it's kind of like it's going to be some turnover. You still have some of the veteran pieces because you signed them to long-term deals and they got their money. So yes, Tyreek Hill is still there. Jalen Ramsey on the defensive side. Jalen Waddle, you signed to a long-term contract. Tua is locked in. But now when you have some of these core, with Zach Sealer, of course, but when you have these core players like Calais Campbell now moving on, as he came here to compete for a Super Bowl in one of what was expected to be one of his last seasons at least. And, it was a cool story to go back to where he played his college football at the University of Miami, to play for the professional team, which he had never done in Miami. Then after they had just had an 11-6 season, and you had all these excuses or reasons why, okay, half the defense was out. They collapsed at the end. If that doesn't happen, you can see how they could maybe last year get back to it. Even without a Christian Wilkins, without a Robert Hunt, Andrew Van Ginkel, and so on. But it didn't play out that way. And then now it's kind of like, all right, now maybe that was the peak where they were in 2023. And then now it starts to decline, beginning with this last season, which still could have gone differently if Tua was healthy. And that's sort of like the one little saving grace that you still wonder, okay, if Tua has a healthy season like he did in 2023, could they get back to that 11-win range and be a solidified playoff team instead of hovering around 500, trying to get in, hoping for help in week 18, and then ultimately just falling flat and not making the playoffs? It could very well just go the same way last season went.
I mean, right now, be honest with yourself. Be honest with the crowd out there. Let's just say the draft produces one or two guys that are impactful, okay? And then the other guys might be some, serviceable or young players that you can build on for the future. But it's hard to imagine 4 or 5 guys becoming instant starter and super impacts. And that would really, catapult the Dolphins. That would be awesome. I hope it happens. But it's unrealistic to put that much pressure on the draft. But let's say 2 guys come out of the draft right away that help you make an impact. Where is this do you see a playoff team next year? Honestly.
I see a team that's probably just hovering around 500, and it's going to be like a playoff scenarios type of thing. You know how there's like 5 teams still in it some years in that final week? It's like they maybe need some help and maybe get the 7 seed, but I don't see them like as a just surefire, you're getting into the playoffs, you know, like all right, Buffalo's going to control the AFC East.
You're saying we're Motley Crue. It's the same old situation. It's the same old ball and chain, right? That's exactly it. We're the middling team. We're either good enough to beat the bad teams or barely good enough to just get it. Is that what you're telling me again?
Beautiful voice, Big O. I thought you only had a voice for sports talk radio and podcasting, but my goodness, you got some pipes you could sing.
There we go. A little Vince Neil for you right there. So yeah.
But that's exactly right, though, Big O. I mean, it's hard to find a scenario where you're back to really all right, because Buffalo's going to control the AFC East. You already know you're not winning the division, but it's hard to envision a scenario where they are like locked in, like can clinch a playoff spot with a couple of weeks remaining, be that either 5 seed or maybe if there's another strong wild card, be a 6 seed, but one that could actually compete and go on the road. It's hard to envision that level of a rise when your best shot at it in 2023, when the Bills actually struggled and when you were actually 3 games up on them with 5 weeks remaining and you had it essentially, I mean, like those odds makers sites had it at 99% chance of the Dolphins winning the division, and you blew that opportunity. That was the best shot. And then now it's highly unlikely that you get back to that. It's kind of like, yeah, they might be like, hoping for 9-8. And then it's, if another team loses in week 18, you could get in. They might be alive going into week 18 and then need some help. I feel like it's going to be another season with one of those scenarios going into the finale, wherever that may be.
Yeah, that's the sad part. All right, so as we get closer and we get closer to the draft, and I'm going to be doing a bunch of little draft shows coming up soon as we get a little closer. Where are you at now at 13? Are you going guard, tackle, whatever, or defensive tackle? What's where are you leaning to?
I'm still leaning to the O-line because you still need another starter at guard. But if it's one of those, see, I always say these top 3, the truly tackles, but they possess the positional versatility where they can start off at guard. So Armand Membo, number 1 out of Missouri, but I think he'll be gone now. If Will Campbell is there out of LSU, but he might be the second one. So I kind of look at Texas's Kelvin Banks. If he's there, then Texas runs a very similar offense, runs the zone blocking scheme. And I've heard from one of their players actually who was training locally how they actually took some plays from the Dolphins themselves. And then I still think back to how Mike McDaniel was at the Xavier Worthy Pro Day last year, and there were all those viral shots. And I start to think all these connections and think if Kelvin Banks is there, who is a true tackle, but could comfortably probably start off at guard, maybe in a similar vein of Laramie Tunsil when he started off with the Dolphins, then that could be something that would appeal to me. But I would not be mad if one of those top defensive tackles. Now, I don't think Mason Graham's going to be there. He's probably going to be gone. But if it's Walter Nolan, maybe because he kind of goes in that range and is that quality of a player, or the Michigan cornerback Will Johnson, who I previously called Will Campbell, but that's the offensive lineman. But Will Johnson would be quite a home run pick, where these guys could be considered best player available, which is how Greer is going to view the draft, and would at the same time fill positional needs. The Dolphins could use a cornerback after they release Kendall Fuller. They need to add young depth to the defensive line and offensive line. There's obviously still a starting spot there to be won, while they just need good blockers overall that fit the scheme.
All right, I gotta ask it because I have no choice, and people love this shit. But at the same time, guards can be found and defensive tackles can be found second and then third round. This is kind of draft where maybe you might be able to even get a defensive tackle in the third round, actually. And defensive tackles have a tendency of actually good ones have developed many over the years in the later rounds, in the middle rounds. Okay, well we had Paul Soliai here, who was a fifth rounder, and he was a heck of a player, overall. So you can find guys. So all the Jackson Dart hype out there, and some like him, some don't. There's no doubt he's got NFL ability. Okay, there's no doubt. So if you're the Dolphins, and if there happens to be a market, and I don't know how you feel about it, if there's a market for the kid, if you're the Dolphins, do you explore? This is not a Tua thing. I'm talking about drafting to trade Dart. How much of that is reality? How much of it is rumor? How much of it is unrealistic because maybe you think he's going to be gone now or something along those lines? So talk to me about that option, because that might be something that they could turn into extra capital.
You're saying at 13?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I wouldn't see this scenario where they draft him and then trade him on the back end, but I could see, all right, let's say Cam Ward's number one, and Shedeur Sanders also goes somewhere else high, and then another quarterback needy team is targeting Jackson Dart. I would trade the pick more so if let's say he's still available at 13. If I'm the Dolphins, sure, I go and make some phone calls and see if those quarterback needy teams are looking at Jackson Dart and that hype and saying, okay, let's get him now, because we've seen how undrafted quarterbacks can just skyrocket up there. Like the last year, it was 6 in the first 12 picks, and a lot of those guys people thought maybe end of the first, maybe going into the second, and then all of a sudden, you had Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix all gone by pick number 12. So I could see a sort of like draft day catapult for Jackson Dart. But if I'm the Dolphins, I would maybe trade the pick and then move, whether it's moving back in the first round so that whoever that team is, they want to go and grab them at that spot, and then maybe add some capital, get another second rounder out of it, so that then you can maybe, because all right, if you're talking about 2 impactful players in a 10 draft class, if you had 3 picks in the first, second round, you could start venturing into the possibilities of, all right, we can now maybe get 3 impactful players. That's another shot at a quality immediate starter who can be a long-time a player of value for the franchise. So, and just because sometimes you're going to miss on these picks, if you have more shots at it, then you're going to hit on some of these. So, I would like that scenario, especially since they have options and different holes to fill, where you could trade back and then maybe take Gray Zabel later in the first round, because he's a guy who I love, but it's just I don't see it where you would take him as high as 13. Maybe once a few more linemen are off the board, you can take him, but he's a guy who could play any position and could fit into the scheme. So I would love him in a trade back scenario.
Now back to the guard thing. I hear people or read when people say, "Oh, you can't take a guard at 13; it's too high." You got to take him at 18 or 25 or something. Trade down. That's the same bullshit we kept saying about Rob Hunt, and we were all wrong. You can't pay a guard 20 million. Well, now guards go for 20 million. The good ones are going for 20 million. It's just that Rob Hunt started it, but a really good guard was going to get 20 million, because that's where we were going, whether you like it or not. And so if you have conviction on a guy that is a tackle guard or whatever, or just a pure guard, but if the guy is going to be a hell of a player for you, who gives a shit? You can't take the chance of trading down to 18 or 23 or something and say, no, he'll be there, and then he's gone and you're screwed. Screw that, bro. If the guy can play and you think you're going to put him in right now at left guard, and he's going to be your starter and he's going to kick ass, then he's going to be a great pick at 13. It doesn't matter if his grade is 18 or 21. take the damn guy if the guy is worthy of it. Does that thinking have to change a little bit from teams to the rest of us?
Well, I still see, because Chris Greer, he still values those premium positions, right? So I still think he wouldn't view guard as a premium position. Now, maybe a lot of some NFL folks are, because that's why you're seeing these guards go for that much money. Like when I asked the Panthers coach Dave Canales at last year's owners meetings, which I just came back from this year, about making Robert Hunt a $100 million guard, and he was talking about building from the inside out, that he sees that as something of value, instead of like you would traditionally think, all right, get your tackles in line on the defensive line or for your defensive front. You get your edge rushers first. But, just now the way we're seeing that Rob Hunt scenario, the Christian Wilkins, and how much defensive tackles are also making compared to the edge rushers. Yeah, you are starting to see some of that, okay, like the interior really being emphasized. So I could see, but so this is why I can still see it where it's someone who fits as a starting guard to begin with in their career, but that long term, the plan might be tackle, whether it's eventually, if it's Austin Jackson or Patrick Paul's spot, if he doesn't work out, he's still gonna be a little unproven and still developing as someone who was raw last year. At least you have some more competition. You're hedging your bet a little bit, where you have another solid player who can play tackle, or if his long-term prospects are a guard, then so be it. Great, fantastic. Especially if the other two are doing a great job at tackles, then that's a problem you would love to have. So that's why I still like that it's a guard, but who has the positional versatility to play tackle.
Right.
But I wouldn't go with the pure guard like a Tyler Booker, who, as we've mentioned on the show, kind of like is more of like in a phone booth type blocker. I think you want that athleticism in Mike McDaniel's offense.
Yeah. I don't like Booker for this system whatsoever. I think Booker can play in the NFL.
Oh yeah, he's going to be great for some team.
Yeah, but it has to be a different, not this scheme. This scheme, he doesn't fit this. He doesn't have the athleticism to do what they want to do. You know what I'm saying? And that's just, it doesn't mean he's not a good player and he's worthy of being picked. Fuck yeah, but you not for the Dolphins. He just doesn't fit. But yeah, it's just, to me, Zach Martin turned out to be a hell of a player for the Dallas Cowboys. Who gives a shit, dude? If the guy can ball, take him at 13. And if he happens to be a tackle, which is probably what you're doing anyways, at that spot, the guys that were, except for Membo is really more of a guard. He's really not a tackle, right?
Tackle, probably. I think most people consider him as a tackle. The first true guard on people's boards is Tyler Booker, but he's a guy who can play guard as well. So,
but the Membo kid is being kind of looked at like most people are looking at him like a mauling guard. Like, right? Aren't they looking at him like, whoa, this guy, like, he can play tackle, but like all these guys, all the top guys that we've been talking about there, they all play tackle, but a lot of people are like looking at Membo like this guy could be like a nasty ass guard. I'm just saying.
No, he could do both, but I think people see him as still tackle first, but who can play guard.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's interesting. I love that kid. I like a Zach Martin type. That's how I see him. I see like a guy that, he can play tackle. Rob Hunt could play tackle.
Rob Hunt started off as a tackle.
Right. Well, yeah, but he was mostly a guard for what is it, the Raging Cajuns or whatever the hell his team was named.
Yeah, Louisiana. Was it Louisiana Lafayette or Louisiana Monroe? Lafayette, right? I can't get it wrong now. I love Robert Hunt too much.
He played some left tackle there and everything, but he was mostly a guard there, right? But he had tackle ability. But there are some of those guys that you look at, and Membu is one of those guys that, he can play tackle. There's no doubt. But, man, you look at him, and it's like, well, this guy could be a guard that will just be, And for Miami, that's what they need. I don't have a problem with taking a guy that's a tackle, but you're going to play him at guard. I just, some people worry about that. I just don't worry about that at all. If the guy can play ball, that's all that really matters, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw the value of guards last year with the Robert Jones, Liam Eichenberg combination and what you got out of that offensive line. So the loss of Robert Hunt was definitely felt for the Dolphins last year. And for Hunt, yes, I think they go by Louisiana now. But yes, the Raging Cajuns. But
What it
it's
was? Okay, Rage.
the one at Lafayette. Yes, the Raging Cajuns.
Right. That was his team.
One of the
right?
best names.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Definitely. No doubt about that. Where are you with Patrick Paul? Because there are some people that aren't necessarily convinced. And I get it because he hasn't played enough, but I'm not one of those guys that says you got to try to go. That's why I wasn't big on bringing back Tehran anyways, even though I don't think he's going to sacrifice his body for these people anymore. But to me, you've got to turn the page, and Patrick Paul better be a good player because that's what you drafted him for. He better be your starting left tackle. Are you viewing it that way, or are you kind of worried about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, you got to have some worry just because we haven't seen it yet. And we do know he was a project and a little bit raw coming out of Houston last season in the draft. So, you drafted him knowing you had Teron Armstead last season, but that he would have a year to develop and sit behind him and learn from one of the best teachers and a 5-time Pro Bowler in Teron Armstead with the opportunity that, as can happen and has happened for Armstead, that he would get hurt, and then that in those situations, Paul could get some playing time, but just not knowing when he's going to get those reps and when he's going to be a starter. So I think that's why this offseason's development is so key for him. I'd just be guessing right now because the last thing we have is just the end of last season. So I'd still be guessing. I want to see how he comes out in OTAs and minicamp. I think that's one thing that is really what we're going to focus on, and what can come out of that is watching his reps and seeing the strides that he made from year 1 to year 2. But everything I hear is that he is in that building and really committed to the craft. I tell you, just his personality is one that I would bet on, because I do feel it's so important to him, and that he carries the right mindset where he is going to put everything he can, invest everything he has into his craft and go about it. So that's one thing I'm really going to be looking for in OTAs and minicamp, is when we start seeing those on the field reps, how much he has improved. And if you're starting to see signs that he is someone who can be counted on in year 2 as a starting left tackle in the pros.
All right. What do you got going on in the Sentinel so folks can check you out?
Yeah, I was just writing about what did I do yesterday? Shoot, I'm already forgetting. What are the Dolphins doing at defensive tackle and cornerback? That's what I wrote coming off of the news, of course, that Calais Campbell is moving on now that it was official. Although everyone can see the writing on the wall, so those are sort of the two big spots still: defensive tackle and that corner. There's the possibilities of it, if it's some Cam Smith, Storm Duck competition, but if they could get someone in there in the draft. And so aside from guard, which has just been belabored at this point, then those two spots, which have really just been not addressed yet this offseason. And just having a weekend before we start getting into a month of real draft prep before the draft and the end of the month. So we'll have a series of different positional looks at the draft. Myself and Chris Perkins, he'll break down the positions, the players at different positions in the draft. I'll break down the Dolphins' perspective on those positions and what we could be thinking. And maybe at some point we're going to get some Teron Armstead news soon. So I'm on the lookout for that.
Yeah, he'll be announcing his retirement soon. All right, good stuff there. And
By the looks of it, right?
Yeah, don't look at your
consistent with Calais Campbell and all that.
Yeah, and by the way, don't look at your 401k because the Dow is down 1,371 points. So hang in there. Follow him on Twitter at David Furones _ Catch his work there at the South Florida Sun Sentinel. And of course, if you need lawyers you can count on, Jeff Welt and Daniel Rheaume. Dolphins can't find offensive linemen they can count on, but you can find 2 lawyers you can count on in Jeff Welt and Daniel Rheaume. Bankruptcy, homeowner property damage, personal injury, commercial litigation, condo damage, criminal defense, business owner claims, Call my guys, Jeff Welt and Daniel Rheaume. The consultation's completely free. 954-966-4646. Manny Navarro is next.
This is the